All right, hello everyone, and welcome to the panel. Can we finally admit that games should be in the classrooms? With me is Zach Hartzman, Marianne Cullinan, and Adam Mills. And I am Harry Louisides, and I'll be facilitating this event. So I just wanted to first off thank everyone for coming. I know this location is a little bit off the beaten path on the entire Javits Center, but I'm very excited that you guys can come and join us and hopefully get something out of the panel that you can incorporate into your own education or lifestyle. So before I go into detail on the panelists and when they introduce themselves a little bit further, I wanted to briefly bring up the goals for our panel. So we have three main goals that we would like to offer you guys as something to kind of take away. So the first thing that we're hoping to do is to integrate games into classrooms for enrichment and learning, and we'll be discussing that. Our second item is to offer numerous game-based and project-based examples to participants that can easily be implemented into the classroom or any educational location. And we're going to have a bunch of those, ranging from STEM to ELA to social studies and beyond. And then our third main goal is to provide avenues of support and collaboration for educators. So where you can get additional information, where you can kind of bounce ideas off of, et cetera. So with me, like I said, is our first panelist, and that's going to be Zachary Hartzman. So Zach, if you'd like to introduce yourself to everyone.
Sure. So what's going on, everyone? I'm Zach Hartzman. I am a social studies and ELA teacher here in New York City. I teach at a public high school in the Bronx, in the Marble Hill area. I assume there are people live from the city or from New York in here. My school is Ellis Preparatory Academy. It is one school in a building of 7 schools, which is very fun during COVID times. And my school is a 100% immigrant and English as a new language population. They're also overage, typically, since it's also a transfer school. So just a very diverse group of students. I'm also the founder of Hey Listen Games. It's a website I launched a couple of years ago dedicated to the creation of curriculum around teaching with video games and game-based learning. I incorporate video games all the time into my various history classes that I've taught over the years and my ELA class, which is an elective course specifically dedicated to teaching video games as literature. So all of my curriculum is on Hey Listen Games completely for free for anyone who's interested in it. It's also a blog where I'll talk about my experiences using these video games in my classes and providing all my rationales for the different curriculum I have on the site. And then this past year, 2020, at the Game Awards, I was chosen as one of the inaugural members for the Future class. It was a group of 50 people across the world, diversifying the gaming art form and making it like a more inclusive space, which was really cool. And nominations are open for this year's Game Awards, and I'm just going to quickly shout out Nominate Harry. Nominate Harry for the Future class this year. It'll be super cool. I was the only educator in this group, but everyone in that group of people was really game devs and journalists and people in the industry, so it was cool being an outsider there. So definitely, we got to get another teacher in that group of people.
I won't be offended if you don't want to, but please. All right, thank you, Zach. Next, we have Marianne Cullinan. So, Marianne.
Hello, friendos. So let's get hyped. I'm from New Hampshire. Woo! Yes. Woo! Yeah, okay, thank you. Live free or die, baby.
Whoa, sit down.
So welcome, come on in. We're glad you're here. You're just in time. I'm a middle school teacher, and I teach enrichment, which basically means I have all the kids who are square pegs in a round hole. And so my bread and butter is 7th and 8th grade boys who have ADHD. But we have everything under the sun, and I sometimes also teach science. I teach photography, costume design. We're doing ancient warfare this fall. That's really fun. So it's a whole smorgasbord of opportunities. I just started my website since the last time we did this panel. I know, it's still under construction. I am a representative here for role-playing games like D&D and using those in the classroom. So if you're interested in those things or doing any kind of D&D stuff with kids after school, then you should check out my little website. I'm a PhD student at Lesley University. I'm doing research about how using role-playing games for middle schoolers for content learning and social emotional learning. And I was the 2018 Sanford Award winner for inspirational teaching, which was really cool. And it came with money, which never happens in education. Yeah. So now I have a work sink at my house. That's what I did with it. I know.
Very
So,
exciting.
yeah. So thank you for being here. We're excited to have you.
All right, thank you, Marianne. Next, we have Adam Mills.
Hi, everybody. Thanks for being here. I am a high school special education social studies teacher at West Hempstead High School in Nassau County, Long Island, New York.
Get hyped.
yeah,
Long
I mean-
Island, get hyped. Come on.
There
yeah.
we go.
You don't need to get hyped about Long Island. It's okay.
It's not like I said, I'm from New Hampshire.
Yeah, live for your guy, baby.
In addition to my 18 years of teaching experience, I have also been involved in online course design for the University of California, the Irvine Extension. As part of that, I was able to jump onto a design team for a course-based game called How to Survive a Zombie Apocalypse that kind of fell apart, but was really fun to be a part of. And I also recently, in the last year or so, just around the beginning of our whole, pandemic, wrote and self-published my first children's book called You Are Your Own Superhero.
Available on Amazon.
And Etsy.
All right, thank you, Adam.
Thank you.
And next is me. I'm Harry Loizides at Il Grill Chill on all social media platforms. I am a mathematics teacher in the same building as Adam Mills, so I'm also at West Hempstead High School, so very cool. In addition to that, I am also the managing editor for 61 Indie, which is a small website that amplifies indie games and voices, where I usually do a bunch of reviews or impressions or awesome lists of things you should check out. In addition to that, I'm a 10 under 10 young alumni from Adelphi University, which is thank you. Yeah, Adelphi, hey. Oh, then we will chat later.
Get hyped.
Get high. Woo!
We haven't even started yet, and we're hyped.
Which is pretty much a new thing that they started a couple years ago where they highlight 10 young alumni that are doing exceptional things. Not to toot my own horn, but thank you. As well, I've also been a grant recipient for various projects about gamification and game-based learning, which usually has stemmed from the advisory position I've done as a technology club advisor, as well as the yearbook club advisor and mathletes club advisor. So I'm a very busy boy, as everyone else here on the panel is. So enough about me. Let's talk about more stuff about me. So some of the examples that we're going to highlight are going to be mostly content focused, but we're also going to diversify with special ed, ELL students, as well as gamification specific items. So we're going to start with one of my favorite topics, since I'm a math teacher, is math. So this year and last year, I've been privileged of teaching a game theory class, which I kind of spearheaded to the school as a 1/3 talking about games, 1/3 analyzing games, and 1/3 playing games, where students can kind of see the math or the contents behind the games that they're playing, whether it's tabletop or video games, or even just like Red Rover or Tic-Tac-Toe that's sequential based. There might be a finite number of moves, stuff like that. The images I showed right now are some items that I have used not only in that game theory class, but in the other classes I've taught, whether it's algebra, geometry, algebra 2, business math, or any combination of those. So on the top, I have the Pokemon logo, or not logo, but a screenshot of that, where one of the activities or project-based activities I focused on was an item around probability. This was mostly with my juniors and seniors who already had some experience about probability, but it can be tailored to be at any level, which is why I like probability so much. So with those students, I focused on allowing them choice to create a game that they want to analyze for contextual purposes. So the example I showed them was in Pokemon Blue and using the attack Thunder. So the probability of that being successful is 70%. Since I was able to have it as a higher level math class, I talked about what's the probability of it being exactly 3 out of 5 times, or at most 4 times, or at least 2 times, giving them more options with a variety of math and the difficulty tailored to it. Since that class of game theory, the abilities ranged wildly. I differentiated to make sure that this challenge students were being challenged with the level of discourse, and the students who kind of struggled with math were able to still be successful, but at their pace and level. Some students did Fortnite with the probability of getting an epic weapon. Some students did NBA 2K with the probability of getting like legendary characters or whatever. I'm not familiar with NBA 2K, I'm sorry. But they were able to have a lot of fun with it. They spent like a week playing their game and then analyze it in a contextual purpose. Another thing I really liked that I kind of brought to my class was Super Smash Bros. Ultimate, where it has the training area, which is literally a graph. So I kind of allowed the students to kind of play around, took screenshots of functions, and then we used it in our algebra class to create regressions to see how close of it could it be a parabola, could it be a line, could it be an exponential function, and then using their understanding of the math to contextualize it in the video game. Which is the same idea that I did with Angry Birds, which is once again on the bottom, where we brought it into a graph where the students were able to contextualize, all right, why do I need to care about a parabola? Well, you know, it's useful in everyday applications, and especially now that Angry Birds got remade or remastered or whatever for the Apple Arcade, we kind of brought that in and say, okay, well, what kind of parabola would you be using? Would you be doing a narrow one? What would the A value be? So my math people know what I'm talking about. Like what would be the axis of symmetry to see where you would line up? Would you want to do a parabola? Would you want to try and do some other function? Those kinds of questions, though it's not directly related to their state of test, applying that knowledge and contextualizing it, whether it's a video game or a football being kicked or some other items, is important. And I did the same thing with Mario when he jumps, because when you map the distance he's jumping versus the height versus the time or whatever, it creates parabola, which is super fun. And then for my geometry peeps, Dungeons and Dragons I've kind of been using a lot in terms of talking about a line, an area of a circle, or the outline of a circle. Like Adam and I are in a D&D campaign, right? Yeah, campaign. Where I'm all the time using Pythagorean theorem and the area of a circle to kind of make sure that, all right, well, if I move over here, I'll be just close enough to do the damage, or I'll be just far enough to make sure I'm not like inflicting damage on my partners or party members. So some students kind of roll their eyes when I give those examples. Some students really lean into it, and kind of giving those students something that they can lean into for something that they might not really know or really care about is really important to kind of contextualize everything. And even with these are only like 5 or 6 examples. I constantly ask my students, like, what are something that you like? I'll try it out and then see if we can find some application for it in a meaningful way. And that'll be stuff that we talk about in a few. All right, well, that's enough about math. Let's talk about social studies.
All right, so up here are a number of games that I've taught with over the years. I'll start with the Republia Times down there at the bottom. This is one of the first video games that I taught with years back when I was trying to dip my toes into actually using video games in my classroom. And specifically, when I'm talking about using video games in my classroom, I'm not talking about educational games. I use entertainment games that were made for fun, for entertainment purposes, that I'm just using as a text, the same way we would use a book, a poem, a movie, music, documentary, short story, comics, manga, whatever. It's just now I'm adding video games to that list. And I was teaching a unit on propaganda, or specifically it was propaganda during World War II. And the Republia Times puts you in the shoes of a minister of propaganda for the fictional nation of Republia. And you need to build loyalty among the populace. And if you don't, your family is put in danger by the authoritarian government. And you basically choose what headlines go on the front page of this newspaper. And you decide how big to make the headlines, like which ones are going to grab your attention or the attention of the people reading it. And it tracks the popularity of your newspaper and loyalty among the populace. But then as you're doing it, a rebellion will contact you to now do the opposite and sow disloyalty. So then you have to choose headlines that you can choose to ignore them, or you can go with the rebellion and try and make the government look bad. And so it plays into how media affects our perception of what's happening in our surroundings. And it's free. It's playable on web browsers. So I know I have Chromebooks. so it's very easy for every student to have their own copy. Historically, I've had them play in pairs or as groups, and it takes about 15 minutes to finish. So it's like a super easy first game for any history teacher to use. I used it in my U.S. history class, but it's not specific to U.S. history. You can do this in world or Euro or African history, Asian history, anyway, because it's just about propaganda. And then I moved to Papers, Please, which is actually developed by it's the same developer, Lucas Pope. And I love this game because my school is a 100% immigrant population, and I always have a unit on immigration because of that, because I like to bring in my students' personal experiences and tap into like their background knowledge on things. And this game, you play as a border patrol agent during a refugee crisis, and you decide who can come into your country. And it's someone comes up, they give you their documents, you have to scan the documents, look at them, and decide whether or not they have sufficient documentation to enter your fictional country of Arstotzka. And it's looking at their passports, it's looking at working papers, it's looking at certifications, and you basically just stamp yes or no, and that's it. That's the game. And having my students in particular play this game is like the most fun activity every single year, because my students, some of them, it's always extremes. Some of them are like, no, I had to follow all the rules when I moved to the United States, so no, you're out of here. Go get out of here. And then other ones were like way more empathetic. They're like, no, I'm letting everyone in. Come on. But if you do that, it, again, same developer, puts your family in danger. So you're kind of playing with the morality of what to do in these situations. And I don't actually play, the whole game is about 8 hours, but I only play about 30 minutes with them just to get those conversations going. So I'll play it, and then it's just like, let's have a Socratic for 30 minutes to talk about what we did in the game. And Valiant Hearts is a great game to teach about World War I. It's made in collaboration with a number of actual museums, so there are primary sources and artifacts like embedded into the actual game. Never Alone is like a must play if you're going to teach about Indigenous history, Native American history. It's about Native Inuits in Alaska, and it's a folklore tale. So it's about 3 hours, but the game is actually made in collaboration with the Native people who live in Alaska, and there's documentary clips of those people explaining what you're seeing in the game scattered throughout. So it's just a really phenomenal game. I only had the opportunity to teach that once when I taught global history 7 years ago, but I haven't taught global anymore. When I say, I know that's Alaska, but in my global class we just did like native populations from all over the world, not just the US. And then I've never taught We're Doomed, so maybe.
Yeah, that's a tabletop game. Adam Mills and I played it in the fall of 2019 during PAX Unplugged, where it's a 15-minute game where each character or each person that's playing up to 8 players is a type of government, whether it's theocracy, oligarchy, democracy, whatever, with each of their own abilities to mirror the concept of whatever organization they are. And you either have to work together to get off the planet, or let it all burn kind of thing, because you're faced with a cataclysmic situation. So it's really fun to kind of see how each type of government is contextualized and how each person wants to play that government. And it's only 15 minutes, so if you want to try it out like as a team and then see if your students would like that. And it's only $35, which is a not terrible price tag for some tabletop games.
And that one is a great one as well at different grade levels, because you could play it with your 9th and 10th graders to introduce, enduring issue connections to desire for power, but you could also play it with your seniors in Part Gov and, at the beginning to kind of introduce all the different styles of government.
Cool, thank you. All right, let's go.
And I've done a lot more history lessons over the years. So like, go to my website, Hey Listen Games. There's like 18 other different activities that I've done over my years teaching.
A fantastic and free resource. Now let's talk about ELA examples. So Zach, if you'd like to take it.
So I also teach an ELA class. It's an elective class that I teach twice a week on Tuesdays and Thursdays. So I'm actually missing it today. Those students are very disappointed that I'm not there with them. And I'll start with What Remains of Edith Finch there, because that is the game that we are currently playing right now. And it's one of the best games you could teach in an ELA class. When I use it, I specifically have students analyze the various literary elements or rhetorical devices as used in the game. So it's really the same skills that they're already learning in their standard ELA class, but then now they're just applying it to a video game as the text. And it leads to a lot of like enhanced conversations because it's not just one author, right? It's actually a whole team of people that put this together. So they're looking at every single decision that was made and like, why is this thing here? Why is that there? Why was it put this way? And it's very accessible. It's just a walking simulator. So you really, it's first person perspective and you're just walking around a house and examining and looking through things and just learning the story as it goes. There's no combat, there's no fighting, it's just fairly simple controls wise. So it's an easy starting point for a lot of students who haven't played games. When I play games, usually I'm playing together as a class. I don't expect my students to have any of this tech at home. I just project it in the front of my classroom and I have one student, like when I'm playing a game like Edith Finch, I have one student playing at a time, holding the controller, and the rest are treating it as if they would a movie or a documentary or video clip that I've done a million times. So they don't need to learn anything new when engaging with the game, except for the actual player. And then they'll switch as needed. And Edith Finch is the game, like if you have kids in your class who I'm not into video games or they roll their eyes at video games, this is the game that's kind of going to hook their attention because it's just such a different story, like thematically, than they're accustomed to. Because a lot of our students, when they think of video games, they're thinking of Call of Duty or Fortnite or Mario, right? And this is just not like that, which is why I like indie games so much, because they tell a lot of these really unique stories. Whenever I use games, it's really in that like 3.5 hour maximum, right? Because we don't have the class time to spend hours and hours and hours playing games. So like if you can get a game done in a week, then it's perfect. Emily is Away. Do any of you know Emily is Away? Cool. So this game is great because all our kids know how to text. They can text in some capacity. So using a game that is just AOL Instant Messenger, that's the game. It has all the sound effects and all the images that's super nostalgic for you, but won't be nostalgic for them. But it's great crazy. Because they do this every day with all their social media. So when they see like our archaic social media and the way that we communicated, it's fun for them. And yeah, it's a visual novel. So it's a game, but it's just a visual novel where you're choosing dialogue choices to progress the story forward. And it's super cringy because it's exactly how you spoke when you were a dumb teenager.
It's not an exaggeration either.
I'm not exaggerating. Like you're gonna feel like that uneasiness in your stomach because it's exactly what you said. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And it's great. So I also taught with that. That was the first game I used this year in my video game lit class. It's just like a super easy introduction. That it is also free on Steam or to download. There are 2 sequels, which I do recommend playing, but you do have to pay for them. And then games like Florence and Journey, I love because there is no speaking. It's completely silent. It's all visual and auditory, which for my students in particular, they're all English as new language students. So regardless of which, I have students from Dominican Republic and various areas of South America. I have students from Bangladesh. I have students from Yemen. I have students from West Africa. I have students that speak French, that are French speakers. I have students from Africa who are not French speakers. So I have a ton of different languages in my class. So using games occasionally like Florence or Journey that are just completely visual and auditory is really great because I can teach the hero's journey in Journey, right, without any words needed. And I can teach about relationships in Florence without any dialogue needed. Gone Home, I recommend. There was some controversy with the writer and developer of Gone Home recently. It's still a great game. I do recommend maybe playing it on your own first before playing with your students and then decide for yourself. But it is like Edith Finch, where it's a walking sim, just walking around the house and learning the story as it goes.
Yeah, and then the one thing I would like to add to ELA is Knights of San Francisco, which I kind of stumbled upon, I guess last summer. Time is just a flat surface after COVID. So it's pretty much a dystopian text adventure, almost like old school, like flipping page to see what happens kind of thing, like Goosebumps and stuff, where you're a person stumbling upon a dystopian future where you are exploring the old ruins of San Francisco. Which has a lot of like mystical elements and really awesome world building that is super subtle but can be expanded by your own imagination. And it kind of blew my mind that it was such an awesome read, an adventure game that was just like a 90-minute read. It was very awesome, and I highly suggest it. It's like less than $4 on the Apple Store, but definitely give it a read, like Zach was saying, before you give it to your students. And that's pretty much a staple for all of these games. Like, try them out first. If you hate the game, it might not be a good fit for you. And I thought it was really cool. I just wanted to implement that into ELA because we're more than just one content area.
And I have about 20 other ELA activities on Hey Listen Games.
Yeah.
It's all free. Go take it, please. Steal it, copy it, do whatever you want with it.
Yeah, wink, wink, nudge, nudge. All right, cool. Thank you so much, Zach. Now I'm going to talk again. I'm sorry. With science and technology briefly. Now, like I said, I'm a math teacher, so my knowledge is super cursory. But Cell the Singularity is a free-to-play game on your phone or on Steam, where it brings you scientifically accurate. A game where it's one of those games that it's a passive game where you kind of just accumulate sums of currency that you buy, whether it is a cell or a DNA or whatever, to eventually bring on the evolutionary tree. So you start off as a single cell, you become multi-organism, then you become DNA, then you become like, I think it's an ape, then a human, then it kind of diverges to other species. And it's super cool, super passive game. I've been playing it for a couple months. I enjoy it. It also goes into the evolution of dinosaurs, where it goes from, I don't remember their names, to more advanced items. And they also are expanding to the solar system, where you kind of start with the Big Bang and then go with stars and then the planets and then asteroids and then the Milky Way galaxy and beyond. It's a fun game. It's very passive, but it's really cool because it's very scientifically accurate. It offers a bunch of like side information if you want a deep knowledge of those, or even just so your students like play for 3 minutes a day, or if you have a free 5 minutes in the class, like those filler activities so they don't go rambunctious in the last 5 minutes and cause havoc. And it's a nice little fun thing. The next item that I thought was really cool is Nintendo Labo, which I think is kind of a dying thing for Nintendo, but it's a really cool activity that Nintendo themselves have kind of showcased to like 6th through 9th graders to kind of get them into engineering, into like creating items through digital platforms. And
Hi,
then
Hype Squad. It's my Hype Squad in the back.
Woo, Hype Squad!
Hi, Hype Squad. When you get really late, then your grown-ups embarrass you. You can just sit down wherever. It's fine. You're doing great. You can come sit right in the front if you want. They love that. Teenagers love that when you
Yes.
point them out.
Put them on blast. And then the last thing I'll briefly talk about is Game Builder Garage, which is a programming game, which is $30 on the Nintendo Switch, which is great. But there's also a free demo to get students to see if they even like creating programs. So if you've played, I think, Gimmick or Scratch, which is kind of like programming tools, this is kind of another extension of it that's very Nintendo oriented and cutesy wootsy. And I've been enjoying it as a 30-something person, so I'm sure the teenagers and below will enjoy it as well. And then the other thing I thought was really cool was Portal, that is also on Hey Listen Games, if Zach wants to chat about it.
Sure. So Portal, I teach history in ELA and an advisory class, a lot of social emotional learning also. And a big request from people was to get science and math content on the website. So Harry's going to be adding some math content pretty soon. But I have added some science content over the years, and an activity I put together is with Portal, specifically Portal 2. There's a level creator in it, which is great to use for teaching like physics concepts and like giving students a playground to actually apply various physics concepts, right? So let them create a room however they want and let them play with momentum, gravity, acceleration, velocity, and just like let them explain to you what's happening in the level that they created. So it's just a super fun way, and limitless way for them to demonstrate the things that they've learned in your class, since we don't always have the physical space to do really cool activities in our classrooms.
Yeah. Cool. Thank you for that. Now, next up is Adam. He's going to spearhead the English language learners and special ed students.
So one of the questions that I know I've stumbled across, and I'm sure many of you might be thinking about in terms of, well, this is all well and good, but how am I going to explain to maybe my administration about why I'm trying to bring games into the classroom? What's the value? As Harry brought up earlier, and Zach mentioned so eloquently at his school, how impactful these games can be for English language learners and how you can differentiate to different skill levels. There's so many other skills that can be built by including games in your curriculum. Obviously, communication skills. If it's a cooperative game, the students have to speak to one another. They have to not only speak well and clearly, but they also have to be able to receive messages. So, that can help with, students with speech and language issues. Cause and effect recognition. Again, I'm a special education history teacher. Cause and effect is, obviously one of the most important skills that we need our students to be able to recognize. And what better way than to have a very specific rule set where when you do this, this happens. Some of our students who struggle most can benefit from those kinds of games. Pattern recognition, as Harry brought up with math and STEAM style games, but also with worker placement games. Lost my train of thought. You guys are so pretty. So content and theme, again, from a social studies perspective, I'm assuming most of us are New York teachers and are dealing at the global history level with enduring issues and trying to have students see not only what enduring issues pop up in specific historic events, but also how they connect to other historic events, which leads to one of the most important things, I think, is content generalization. Their ability to see events from the past and from other content areas in the games they're playing. That's why, Zach brought up the many social studies games that he uses that were made as entertainment games. He's not using specific content-based games. He's using games that were developed for really another purpose, but showing the kids, hey, this is...
No Oregon Trail in my class.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah. I don't play it because I'm terrified of dysentery.
Oh, no.
That was for all my over 35-year-olds in the room.
You're old.
And then inferencing skills, trying to find as many ways to make this cross-curricular as possible. The students who are able to begin through those cause and effect skill building activities begin to kind of inference, well, what's going to happen next? How can I predict where this will go? That also helps with their reading skills and communication skills on the ELA side, as well as again, seeing cause and effect throughout history.
Cool.
I'd like to give you guys a second to just soak in the best GIF I've ever found.
Yeah.
Getting again a little bit more granular with the special ed side of things, there's easy incorporation of accommodations and modifications when you're using video games. If a student has a visual acuity issue, many of these you can zoom in. They have the ability to modify for themselves what they're seeing and how they're seeing it. That allows them to feel much more supported and in a way where they have more control, which, to kind of jump down to the very bottom, is what I would say is the most important aspect of using gaming in the classroom, providing students with an increased sense of agency. All too often, our special education students and our students don't have as much choice in the schools and in terms of their program. I know from experience, I've had so many kids who have had to double up on classes, or because they have to take a resource room or an academic seminar or something like that. They don't get to take the electives that other kids do. They don't get to take the extra band or chorus or art or those things that they might like to do. Adding in gaming to your content gives them a sense of control. They can play a character through, they can modify a character, they can make it their own, and they can feel, even for those few minutes that you're playing the game, like they have some say in their day. And that's something I think that lacks for a lot of our neediest students.
Thank you so much, Adam.
You're very welcome, Harry.
All right, next we have the lovely Marianne to discuss
Hi,
real plays.
everybody. So, first of all, who is a teacher in this room?
Woo!
Woo! How did you get a Thursday off to come to Comic-Con? Good job, everybody. We're super happy to see you here today. And so I don't really use video games in my classroom. I use tabletop games, and specifically I use role-playing games. And you can use, who here plays role-playing games? Yeah! All right, now we're gonna get hyped. So I do use Dungeons and Dragons and Quest and Mouse Guard and some of those games after school. But I think in a classroom setting, you can steal a lot of those good mechanics and ideas, but it needs to be a little more content specific because we're both trying to learn content and work on pro-social skills. So I think we always come back to what's the why? Why are we doing this? We're not just doing it because it's fun, although fun is awesome. And what's realistic? What can we do with what we actually have for resources? And then how long do we have? And so that's the frame I want you to think about as you're thinking about role-playing games in the classroom. So you can start really small. And a lot of times I'll use role-playing game elements for things that I'm going to do anyway. I just add a story to it. Because if there's one thing middle schoolers love to think about, it's other people's love lives. So here's a time that I needed my 8th graders to work on classifying animals into different classes, and they really don't care a lot about the difference between a sponge and a jellyfish. That's not relevant when you're 14, but what is relevant is flirting with a dude and then screwing it up. So basically, we, in our science class last year, everyone had a little mouse character, and it was based on Mouse Guard, and it's called the Explore Corps. And so Findle, our friend here, was trying to impress someone, Seamus, and said that they knew all about this, and they didn't, and now suddenly they are alone with Seamus and a teacher at the ocean. And so they send you a letter, and they're like, can you help me out? Can you be my wing person? And so this is what they have to do. Basically, they're showing that they understand an example, where they are, if they would eat mice, and some examples, right? This is what I was going to have them do anyway in a worksheet, but now they're doing it for Findle and not just for Miss Cullinan, right? And because really, who doesn't want Findle and to end up with Seamus? All right, so that's basically it. So this is just a reimagining of the thing that we're going to do anyway. So that's sort of phase 1. That's the easy phase.
Sorry.
So this is the same. This is another science example. I was teaching about, in the fall in New Hampshire, we have a lot of fungus and we have a lot of mushrooms, especially this year. And I was teaching about that and about dichotomous keys, right? So again, guess what 8th graders don't care about? Different kinds of mushrooms.
Gasp.
I know, right? They really don't care.
I don't understand.
Compared to flirting. And they also don't really care about dichotomous keys, which dichotomous keys are basically decision-making chains. So if you've ever seen in Wired or one of those where it's like a yes-no thing and you figure out like which class you are in D&D based on it or whatever, that's a dichotomous key, and they use it to figure out different animals and plants. And so I combine these two things, and to make them care, I play the part of the chef who comes in and says, all the foragers have dumped all of the mushrooms in a pile, and the children are hungry. What mushroom is what based on this dichotomous key? And I'm going to take the ones that you say are edible and feed them to the mouse children.
No.
And suddenly they might not care if they get a 65 on the dichotomous key, but it's super embarrassing when you murder the entire mouse children. And we had some mouse children die.
Rip.
That was super embarrassing, but no one actually died, so it was fine. Right? So we get all the hilarity of accidentally murdering everyone and none of the responsibility. So But again, this is just reimagining what I was already going to do anyway in a way that's going to be more accessible because middle schoolers want to play pretend. Everyone wants to play pretend. That's probably why you're here at Comic-Con. But middle schoolers still want to play pretend. They were playing pretend very recently, and now it's not as socially acceptable. So that's why we end up with, figurines and cosplay and D&D, and it's awesome. So the next sort of level of thinking about role-playing games in the classroom is, oh, you gotta go back.
I'm sorry.
Sorry, I'm talking, I think that's a hint.
I'm so excited.
Is when you change what you're doing a little bit. So in a different class of 6th graders, I was teaching about blood types. Guess what 6th graders don't really care about? I know this is a theme, but middle schoolers have their own agenda, which is not usually blood types. And so, again, I wanted them to really engage with this concept and understand why it mattered. And I had about 2 days, and I had gotten this little kit of fake blood that they could type, which is cool, and they were into it, but I wanted them to really spend more time than just doing it for a hot second, and also understanding why it was important. So they come in, and there's broken, crockery and some crumbs and some fake blood. And I'm like, oh, look, Oliver Owl spent all this time making all these cookies, and then somebody stole them for the birthday party, and now he looks like he doesn't care, and who would do it? And now you have to be the crime scene detectives. So suddenly, again, it's all about finding that purpose within the materials we already have. So the science and action detectives are on the case, and again, this is a worksheet that I would have done anyway, but now we have a whole bunch of little characters, Ellie Elephant and Gina Giraffe, who stole it, and you get to accuse one person. And if you don't accuse the right person, the wrong person goes to jail. And Odette breaks up with you, I guess. I don't know. But so this gives them, again, a purpose and a reason to check their work. And it raises the stakes in a way that's not truly raising the stakes. So it's fun, but it doesn't really matter if they mess up. So the second level also is I teach photography, and I want them to have a lot of practice. I want them to work on teamwork. It's a 1/4 class, and I only have 8 cameras, but I have 24 kids. Public education. Live free or die. So we needed a lot of practice. We wanted to analyze their work. So I'm like, all right, you are going to Earth to check it out, to try to convince everyone to move there because an asteroid is coming to blow up your planet called Alpha Boson. And other teams are going to other planets. So you're learning how to take photographs and sending back photographs that are going to convince different groups of people to want to move. And you can see that once you've filled in the whole chart, the UFO will come to Earth. It's a pie graph of getting all the work done for the quarter. Right? It is. It's just the same thing. But again, it's fun because now you're sending an artist statement and photographs back in character, and then I'm sending information back to you in character. So Miss Cullinan, person who is helpful, can give you suggestions, and then Calliope, mean head of the interplanetary resource council, can be like, yeah, that's terrible, and you have to do it over. And then I can be like, oh man, right? So I can play both things at once. I get to be good cop and bad cop. Awesome. And so they had a choice of what they wanted to do. Each one of these represented a different group on the planet who might want to come. And once you got the points for it, you could fill it in, and then you'd be headed to Earth. And those, do I have any Adventure Zone fans in here? Yeah, hi. Yeah, that's a Get Hype. So I did steal the IPRA from them. Yes, thank you, Hype Squad. Yeah. Yes, there they are. That's my child and assorted other children that belong to me. So there were a few of them they had to do, but also there's choice in here, right? So they can do what's interesting to them. It really doesn't matter what they take pictures of. Like, who cares? right? As long as they're showing the skill set. And then the last thing, and I'm not going to try to pretend this isn't a lot of work because it is when you totally throw everything out and you make a game that is all encompassing. And so when I was teaching Greek mythology, I really wanted kids to care about Greek mythology, and kids would sign up to be in Greek mythology or be assigned to me, and then they wouldn't want to read any of it, which is, I get, except then we were sort of at an impasse. Because although I do love telling stories, I'm not telling the collected works of Greek mythology to you so that you don't have to read. And again, it was a 1/4 class, and I wanted to get them invested in reading, but I also needed to make sure that I wasn't overwhelming anyone with like DM prep, right? How do you run a role-playing game where you're not the center of it? Because that's not really good practice, but we don't also push more work onto some kids versus other kids. So that was sort of what I was thinking about. So what we came up with was a former student and I made a rotating set of like choose your own adventure, like 150 of them. So you'd click on a square and you'd get a random instance that would make sense for that square. And then at different places on our board, you would run into like the guardian of the Glen, who would only give you the key you needed if you could talk about the themes of a certain set of myths. Something like that. And then the kids also, in part 2, the kids got to make up their own set of, go back.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Go back.
I'm just so excited about the slides.
They got to make up some of their own things, but here's different loot drops. So you got a physical thing. Some of them were funny, some of them were serious, some of them were curses. And so now you can go, thank you.
All right.
And you also got to
Killed it.
have a patron god. And so you kind of did a deep dive into one of the main Olympic gods. You get to have, you could get to be Ares or Athena as your patron, and that would give you different things that were helpful or hindering, depending on what you were doing. Here are some items that the kids created for the game. I particularly like Rusty Sword, better than nothing. That's a good one. This Io curse. They love the myth of Io. This curse makes you only able to say moo for the rest of the day of adventuring. Moo. That's a good one, right? And so there's some really great ones that they made up. And so this is a lot of work, but it has a lot of reward. And I have to tell you, the thing that kids were saddest about with COVID were not being able to do Greek mythology 4 for the kids who had been in it for 3 years. So
I think that's it.
what time is it?
We have about 12 minutes left.
Yeah. Okay.
All right. Moo, 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 moo.
Moo,
Ah,
moo,
sorry.
moo,
Oh,
moo.
sorry. Just kidding. I'm not cursed.
Are you saying it's time to move on?
Yes, thank you.
Are you utterly bored or utterly entertained?
I can't wait to drink milk later.
I
Was
feel
that a
like
good
this is
pun?
getting-
I think you've heard this before.
Thanks for
So-
coming to watch us chew the cud. We can keep the cow jokes going.
Yeah.
So I'm just going to briefly talk about this initiative that I'm doing in my school, and then we'll talk about what can you do.
It's not bull. The initiative.
Ah,
Just don't be cheesy.
Okay, stop. It's going to be a competition.
it's a good idea. All right, moving on.
Was
So-
that a Gouda joke?
It was, thank you, because it's made from milk that make cows.
Yeah.
Yes,
Okay.
anyway. Yeah, so project-based learning.
Yeah, okay. You're stretching now.
Anyway, so this is just briefly thank you, before we do our, how do you do it at home? One of the initiatives I'm doing in two of my classes is Choose Your Character, which is pretty much a Smash reference, so thank you, where students literally choose their own character, whether it's a real person, whether it's an inanimate object, whether it's a video game character, comic book character, like whatever character, and that's their avatar for the year. They describe it, they offer some abilities, and then they also give 10 level attacks, in air quotes, of what they can do. So this person's doing Keropi, which is the cute little frog person. I used examples of Snow White and Charizard and Doctor Strange to kind of start base level and then increase their abilities as they go on. This is pretty much just a classroom management trick, that I'm trying so that each week students can earn up to 3 experience points. Once they get to 5, they get another level. Those levels also equate to bonus points on tests. So that was the hook that I'm trying to get to the students. So they all start at level 1, so everyone's guaranteed 1 bonus point on every assessment, whether it's a project, whether it's a test, quiz, whatever. And then as they do those mystery classroom management goals for the week, if they complete it, and they're all pretty much just do the homework on Wednesday, or don't curse on Thursday, or don't have your name written on when Mr. L is out on Thursday, kind of thing. And they get those experience points. And it's kind of a nice way to gamify classroom management while also giving the students a choice and having them have some fun with it. It's only been about 3 weeks so far. It's been okay, but I'm only test piloting it with 2 classes to kind of see if it's a time management wise, not overwhelming for me, but also a good indicative thing for the students. And that kind of leads into, all right, so we've been talking for about 40 minutes. So how do you actually do this in your own environment? Like how do you, all right, what we've talked about for this time is great, but how do you actually implement it? So we're offering some suggestions on how to do that. So the first thing we're encouraging you to do is to actually plan, which is not the most exciting thing in the world. But if you go in without a game plan, you're kind of just freehanding it. It's not going to be successful for you. It's not going to be successful for the students. And if admin walks in and says like, what the heck is going on? And you can't justify it, that's going to be a kibosh real quick. And I like gifts, so there's going to be a lot of them. The next thing that I'm going to kind of briefly talk about, and if anyone wants to jump in, is to start small and then expand gradually. So what Marianne kind of discussed with some 1 or 2 day activities is phenomenal, and then it branches out to 45 days. You do not want to start with a 45-day activity. You want to start incrementally. One example I usually bring up with this or other project-based activities is I was encouraged to do a 2-week project about a topic for trigonometry in one of my earlier years of education. It did not go over well because I didn't know what I was doing, because it was a 2-week project. Learning from that, I started with a warm-up, which was 5 minutes, then expanded to a period activity, then expanded to a 3-day activity. You don't want to go from 0 to 90 and then kind of like stress yourself out and then in conjunction stress your students out. This is supposed to be an engaging, fun, and meaningful activity that you want to have a lasting impact, not only in the education, but in the fun factor of creating memories with the students. Cool. Other point that we'd like to bring up is to make sure you pair games with content areas that make sense. So if I'm talking about parabolas, I'm not going to jam in, all right, let's talk about Tetris, because there's not really parabolas in Tetris. And making sure that it makes sense to you before you have to try justifying it to the students. So we usually all have like, why do I need to learn this? It's not because I said so. You have to have some sort of context. So explaining it not only to admin or other teachers that are questioning, like, why are you playing games in class? Or even to the parents. You want to make sure that it pairs well.
And I think a different way to say that is it's all about purpose, right? Just like everything that we try to do in the classroom, if I don't use role-playing games with every single thing I do. I like to use them, and it's a tool in the toolbox that I use a lot, but I don't use it in costume design class because that's not the right place for it. We already have a really clear purpose. And so I think, again, just sort of coming back to what is the purpose, what do I need to do, how long do I have to do it, is really important as you're thinking about doing anything that's really different from what you're doing now in the classroom.
And just like when you're writing lesson plans, you can't just you can't just say, okay, well, my purpose is whatever I think. You have to have some sort of backing. And one thing that we didn't really touch on yet was video games is just another tool in your briefcase or in your tool belt or in your like Batmobile or whatever. In English class, you have textbooks, you have regular books, you have videos. Video games and tabletop games is just another extension to articulate the purpose of your education.
And for the New York teachers here, right, all my lessons are always Common Core lines, right? Because that English regions is the biggest barrier to graduation for my students because they are still grappling with language as they're taking that exam. So everything I do, even in my social studies class, is to teach them language and content at the same time. So everything I do is with that specifically, they got to pass that exam. right? So that's what you want to show your ad. First time years ago when I said I want to use a game, the first thing my principal said, okay, was show me the standards, show me the outcomes, what are the essential questions, all right, show me the rubric you're going to use, right? It was all the standard lesson planning stuff, right? So that, like, you need that kind of purpose to make it make sense to an administration that might not really understand fully what you're trying to do with games.
And if you,
Sorry, I just wanted to kind of jump back on something Zach said earlier about using these as text. If you go into, I'm sure we all have gone into, Common Core and the Next Gen standards, they've kind of redefined what a text is. And if you bring it to your admin in your unit plan or in your lesson plan as this is, just another level of text that I'm using to achieve this larger goal, it's a lot more palatable for them.
It's the difference between saying, hey, I'm going to use some video games and play some tabletop games, and being like, I am going to use some modern literature to address standards and at the same time increase the social skills of the middle schoolers and really help engage some of our children who are really challenged to be engaged with this content. Right? It's the same thing.
yeah, admin loves buzzwords. Use the buzzwords. Another thing that I deeply believe in is you want to get feedback from the students. If it's a dumpster fire, they're going to tell you right away. If they liked it, they might hesitate, but they'll say like, "Oh, it's okay." But like giving a clear rubric or giving them a clear like survey of like what was successful, what was not successful. If you were the teacher, what the heck would you do? Because you don't want to keep doing the same thing and the students are not engaged, because then you feel cruddy for having a not great lesson. And then the students don't engage, and then they'll learn what your purpose was. So making sure that you kind of get feedback, even with what games they liked, or the length, or the depth, or the examples, making sure that it goes back to stuff that interests them or relates to them is always a key factor. And especially for math, when you're talking about P's and Q's and formulas and curves, like finding some sort of connection is always an important thing. And then I believe lastly is just like good teaching, you want to reflect in what you were successful in as your own. Identifying what went well, what didn't go so well, and how you can improve for the future. In a perfect world, we will be mastering whatever classes we're teaching. I know for me, my first couple of years, every year was a whole smorgasbord of different classes. So it's very hard to get your bearing. But if you're able to do the same class for 2, 3, 5 years, you're able to hone that in and identify what students are successful with, what they might struggle with, and how to combat that type of difficulty. And you want to do the same thing with the video games and tabletop games that you're using, or gamification techniques. Focusing it in as you're doing it, and then even the next year be like, okay, this was really well. How can I make it better? Or, ooh, this was a dumpster fire. How can I make it less of a dumpster fire? Or just scrap it and try something new. And I think that is the end of our overall panel. If you'd like, well, first off, let me just thank everyone for coming. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
Big thank you to all the panelists. Our contact info in terms of social media is right there if you'd like to take pictures.
Underscore.
Oh my God, I didn't change it.
The underscore.
The Hey Listen Games, there is no underscore. There is a cool story in the back. So if you'd like to discuss it further, we could do it after the panel. But yeah, these are our socials. Please make sure you check out Hey Listen Games. It is a wonderful reference. It is free. Same thing with Mary Ann's new website, which is already wonderful. And I checked it out. It looks wonderful. And it's still in works, but
You can also check out my book. It's not free, but I'll gladly take your money.
But this is a thing we're all really passionate about, and so please feel free to talk to any of us now or anytime, because we love to co-think with you about how to make this happen for you and your students.
And thank you so much, guys. And like Mary Ann said, we're here for chats, but once again, thank you so much for coming, and I hope you guys have a great con.
Thank you so much.